Oh, so I can well, make this easier for you to edit. So my name's Moriarty. I'm a professor of physics here at the University of Nottingham, and a key role at the moment is admissions tutor. So that means I handle applications along with the admissions team here. Handle applications from A-level students, IB students, secondary school students, high school students from the UK and right across the world actually. So there's obviously the teaching side, which is great fun. New generations of physicists coming through, you get to teach them. It's this afternoon. Spent a wonderful half hour actually answering questions after a lecture. That's the great part of the job. Administrative side, filling in the forms, not so much fun, takes a lot of time. Research side, particularly when you get to a certain stage in your career, you don't get down the lab as much, so an awful lot of time is spent coordinating research. Though having said that, it's still possible to make time to actually analyse that research, write up papers. There's things like this. There's also public engagement and outreach. There's interacting with Brady Harron every now and again and making videos and setting up fire alarms in the department. That's all great fun. I can track back to where I decided to do physics. Memories are always an interesting, malleable thing, in that you build a story for yourself and then you remember these you have these memories, and the extent to which they're real or not. But I've checked this with my uncle and he agrees. So the point at which I decided I really wanted to do physics, my uncle was a radio amateur, so he used to spend a lot of time making aerials and antennas and broadcasting and receiving on shortwave radio. And he and I, when I was about 9 or 10, made what's called a crystal radio. So it's a radio which is really straightforward. It's just a diode, a capacitor, an inductor, and an aerial, and a ground connection. And then you have a little crystal earpiece, and you put the crystal earpiece in. And I did that, and fortunately we had a transmitter relatively close to where I was brought up, which was a county called Monaghan, which is one of the border counties in Ireland. And you could hear the radio station, and I looked down and I realised I can hear this, but there's no power source, there's no battery. And sort of realising, well, actually, where's the energy coming from? Where's the power for this? It was the radio waves themselves that drive this thing. And that was like a real moment in terms of wow. And then starting to think about sort of invisible waves, and that's at that point, that's where I really wanted to start getting into physics. What motivates me as a physicist? Insane amounts of coffee. No, there's still an immense pleasure to be found in terms of seeing something that nobody else in the world, possibly nobody else in the universe, has ever seen before. I don't get down the lab that often, but still, you can sort of vicariously live through students and researchers in the group when they bring you this new piece of data or whatever, and they say, well, we don't understand this. And that process of initially confusion, and what the hell does this mean? And the first step is, okay, your first stance has got to be, okay, this doesn't make any sense at all. We've somehow ballsed up the experiment. That's where you start. And then you work back and you go, well, actually, no, we've checked this and we've checked this. Oh, this might be real. And going back, and that process, which can be exceptionally frustrating. It's like learning something. Really, when you learn something, you need that process of confusion, that I don't get my head around this, I can't understand it. And then it seems like a eureka moment, but it's a eureka moment on the basis of thinking about it for 3 months or whatever. It's the same process of research. I love that. I'm almost in tears and banging my head against the table at times, but I love that point where you try to bring all the elements together. So that, almost striving for that moment of clarity amongst all the pain and the frustration, that moment of clarity is worth everything. So the biggest setback, which seemed like an immense setback at the time, but it's interesting with 2020 vision in hindsight, how this massive setback, this sort of life-destroying setback, became something very different. I did a 4-year degree. I failed my third year spectacularly badly, in that I didn't even turn up for a number of exams. And that's because I was more focused on music, I was more focused on being in a band, etc., etc., etc. Now, at the time, that just seemed like the most horrible event ever. But actually, if I hadn't have failed my exams, I'd probably have drifted through fourth year. There's no way I'd have got the marks I needed to go on to do a PhD, which was a 2-1. I needed a 2-1 average. So it seemed like a setback, but actually I would argue it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, looking back, because if I hadn't got that kick in the arse, if you'll excuse the language, as I say, I would have drifted through and I probably wouldn't be doing this job. So I guess, yeah, so in terms of applications and in terms of questions from applicants and questions from the parents, the most common question by far is, what happens if I don't quite get the grades? What happens with near misses? And the answer is very convoluted. This is probably not the right forum for it, but you can drop me an email if you really want to know the answer. But the answer is that we treat, at least in Nottingham, we treat everything on a case-by-case basis. We look at the personal statement, we look at the references, we look at your performance at interview, we roll that in. There isn't an algorithm as such that if you don't get these grades, you're definitely out. It's much more nuanced and it's much more subtle than that, which is gives more work for us, but in the end it means that we end up with students here who really want to be here, students who are really keen, really enthusiastic and really good. What a great question. In terms of questions I wish students would ask, generally students are pretty, I just wish they'd ask more, I guess, that's it. Just more questions generally. I've been here, as I said, since '94. Actually had the opportunity to go back to Dublin a couple of times. Didn't, because I love this department. It's a really collegiate department. It's a really nice place. I think we've got good interactions between staff and students. I think we look out for each other. PhysSoc in particular has been really thriving over the last years, the Physics Society, and we've got good links with PhysSoc. The campus is beautiful. Anybody who's come to Nottingham campus knows how great it is. Moreover, we've got a great deal of flexibility, I think, in terms of what we offer. We've got, in terms of the research interests, we span the very, very large, so the astronomy, through nanoscience, which is what we do, all the way down to particle physics, so we cover that wide range. We've also obviously got the MRI Centre, the medical physics side of things. So a wide range of different reasons why I love Nottingham.